Starship's next-generation hardware keeps reshaping Starbase. NASA and Boeing are redefining the path forward for the Starliner program, and Europe is deciding how much it's willing to invest to stay competitive in space. My name is Connor, and welcome to another episode of Spaceflight News. Booster 18's sudden failure last week exposed far more of the version 3 architecture than SpaceX had ever intended. The blast tore open an entire strake of the vehicle, likely rupturing several COPVs and blowing out large sections of the liquid oxygen tank. Even the central transfer tube took multiple hits, yet the structure stayed upright long enough for the teams to secure it and then to begin dismantling it later on. If nothing else, the event gave SpaceX a rare cross-section of how V3 behaves under extreme loads. Throughout the week, crews cut the booster apart piece by piece. Removing the domes and skins revealed multiple technical aspects. The design differences from Booster 17 are really quite stark, and despite the loss, SpaceX says that the timeline remains largely unchanged. The next version 3 Super Heavy will still be stacked in December, and Flight 12 is still targeted for early 2026. Pad 1 continued its transformation into bare foundations. Crews removed the last major cross-section of the orbital launch mount. Both chopstick rails are now shortened, and the methane subcoolers, pill tanks, and recondenser cryotanks have been pulled out. Once the deluge plate is removed, workers will begin breaking through the 4-meter thick pile cap and the deep foundations pilings that anchored the original pad. Pad 2, in contrast, is rapidly coming online. The ship quick disconnect arms were installed and moved for the first time, with actuators and manifolds being fitted immediately after. Down at the booster quick disconnect, the liquid oxygen hood has been reinstalled and sealed with a new steel plate. For the first time, the entire pad resembles an operational V3 launch site rather than a build zone. Across the production site, version 3 hardware is now dominating the landscape. The new booster transport stand has had all 13 arms installed. The first V3 ship stand has gone from loose steel to full structure in just a couple of days. Gigabay's second level is rising, and in the Megabay, Test Tank S39.1 is being prepared for thruster structure qualifications, while Booster 17 is cleared to make room for the early stacking of Booster 19. Every part of Starbase, the pads, the bays, the tank farms, and even Macy's, is shifting towards version 3. The booster that failed last week didn't really slow the program down. Instead, it's given SpaceX clear data and a bunch of space they needed to accelerate the transition to the V3 timeline. It's now the V3 future and is being welded as we speak. Now onto news this week. NASA and Boeing have agreed to significant revisions of the Starliner program. The first operational mission, Starliner 1, will now fly without astronauts, and instead it'll carry cargo to the ISS. The decision gives NASA and Boeing a full mission to validate the fixes made after last year's thruster failure during the crewed test flight. A critical step for committing astronauts to long-duration missions, the updated contract also reduces Starliner's total ISS missions from 6 down to 4. Reflecting the station's approaching retirement later this decade and NASA's shift towards its post-ISS transportation strategy. The window for the Starliner program is getting shorter by the day. The cargo flights essentially become a proving run for the spacecraft's long-term reliability. Amazon unveiled the production model of its LEO Ultra Terminal, a high-performance phased array antenna designed for its Project Kuiper. It's inspired, presumably, by Starlink, which is also using a phased array antenna system. The terminal delivers up to 1 gigabit download speed and 400 megabit uploads, and it can connect directly into the Amazon Web Services or private cloud networks without touching any public internet. Amazon is advertising it as the fastest commercial terminal in production, positioning it and Kuiper as a serious competitor to the current leader, Starlink. With SpaceX preparing to roll out gigabit-class performance using its upgraded satellites, the orbital broadband market is entering a new phase. Not just fast internet globally, but enterprise-grade connectivity that plugs directly into cloud infrastructure as we scale up AI. Amazon's move signals that satellite broadband is becoming a data center level service, not just consumer connectivity and internet access. Over in Bremen, ESA member states opened 2 days of deliberation on a proposed €22.2 billion budget covering the next 3 years. The meeting carries unusual weight about it. Europe is increasingly concerned about losing its strategic ground in launch capabilities, Earth observation, and its defense-related space systems. ESA's leadership has framed this budget as essential to restoring competitiveness, with some of the funding expected to come from national defense ministries for the very first time. Programs under discussion include the European Resilience from Space Initiative, upgrades to Earth observation fleets, and investments to counter European dependency on external launch providers. Ministers say they're optimistic that they'll secure most of the requested funding, but the final number will signal just how seriously Europe intends to treat space as a geopolitical priority. And with that, onto launches this week. China began the week with a Long March 2F launch, sending an empty crew vehicle to Tiangong to replace the damaged Shenzhou 20 return capsule. After last month's suspected debris strike, the original spacecraft was declared unsafe, making this uncrewed delivery essential to maintaining safe return capabilities for the station's crew. On November 26, South Korea launched its Nuri rocket, carrying the KAS-503 Earth observation satellite. KAS-503 expands Korea's growing high-resolution imaging constellation, providing data for environmental monitoring, mapping, and national security. Nuri continues to demonstrate reliable performance as Korea builds up its domestic orbital launch capabilities. Russia launched a Soyuz from Baikonur Cosmodrome on November 27th, sending a new crew to the International Space Station. The ascent was completely nominal, but the launch drew global attention after photos showed ground infrastructure that was heavily damaged beneath the pad, likely caused by post-launch exhaust overpressure event. The incident adds urgency to concerns over Baikonur's aging facilities, to say the very least. SpaceX's Falcon 9 also lifted off this week from Vandenberg on November 28th with the Transporter rideshare mission, deploying a packed manifest of small satellites into Sun-synchronous orbit. The mission, of course, is highlighting Falcon 9's ongoing dominance in the global small-sat launch market, where it's offering rapid, low-cost access to orbit for commercial and scientific payloads. And on November 30th, China closed this week with a Long March 7A, carrying a classified payload. While details remain very undisclosed, analysts expect it to support early warning or secure communications, part of a growing trend of strategic launches across the eastern region. This week showed just how quickly the landscape on spaceflight can shift. Hardware is evolving and programs are adapting. Nations are recalibrating their place in orbit. Every test, every launch, and every decision adds another step forward into a future where space is not just explored, but relied upon. Stay curious, and we'll see you next week. Bye.